Hello, welcome to Square Base Show with your host, Rob and Val. And if you're excited about starting the old world, this is the show for you. So I assume if you're watching this, now if you are one of our regular viewers or someone who's watched us sometimes, then you will be not surprised by the intro. But if you are someone new and thinking about getting to the old world, that is our regular intro. That's just how we rock.
Mm-hmm. That is the way we even roll.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know how that got a laugh, but buckle up, kids. There's hopefully better than that coming.
So what we're going to be doing today, again, if you're someone who watches all the time, in the comments, add extra context to what we're going to be talking about. But if not, and you are someone who is new and you're thinking about jumping into the old world, one of the things that came up to me when I was live streaming earlier today was people who were new were saying, Rob, there's never a condensed video kind of giving me an overlay of any game. I don't really like, sometimes it's like, here's how to play through the rules, or here's maybe like a quick TLDR about the lore. And we're going to try and basically put all of that together in one video. So if you are thinking about starting the old world in 2026, which we should do, I mean, there could be another video that we do. It's like the top 10 reasons to get into Warhammer the Old World. Like, just do the same video twice, but just different names. A classic mini painting video.
Hey, don't let them in on the secrets of YouTube creation, Rob. Come on. Yeah, but we're going to try and give an overview because more and more people are jumping into the old world. More and more people are old world curious. And New Year, 2026, a new year is normally when people think, sure, I might get into that game now. And the reason we're doing it now and not in December is because Christmas might be the time that you think, actually, around Christmas, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to ask my family to treat me. That's when I'm going to jump in, sort of a situation. And also there's a couple of cool releases coming out very soon. We've got new Cathay, new Marauders. This is at the kind of end of 2025. So I thought this was a good time rather than doing it a little bit later in the year, midway through November. So pretty exciting. Hope you're looking forward to it. If there's anything we leave out, leave some comments below and we will get to those at some point, which is fun. Okay, buddy. So I'm going to start us off if you're okay. Pal.
This is Val, everybody, if you're new. This is Val. I'm Rob. Val. Rob.
That's Rob.
Rob. Yep, that's us. That's us. Okay. So first up, what is the old world? We're going to talk about the setting and the scope of the old world. Okay. So would you like to, or do you want to you can always throw them to me as well, but would you like to give us kind of an overview quickly, narratively, of where we are with the old world? What's the setting? What's the idea?
Yeah, so the idea, I guess, so this is obviously set in what used to be the Warhammer Fantasy Battles universe, and that universe is all of the Games Workshop games. It is a mashup of all of your favorite fantasy tropes, plus I would say some historical wargaming tropes.
Yes.
So you would have a number of different factions representing, I think, things that are cozy and familiar themes and factions, like dwarves, elves, the Empire of Man are the dudes, and they are the humans, I should say, and Cathay now, and Bretonia. So you have all of these protagonists fighting for control of a world that looks a lot like planet Earth, and the factions are placed in places that are sort of analogous to where they would be in the real world. And that's sort of like the generalized setting, but it's very, very deep lore. It's been around for, I think, over 40 years now, right? Because in 1983 is the first edition.
10, it's kind of a classic hobbyist situation. Played it a lot until a certain point, went away for 10 years, returned.
But did it go away for 10 years? Because in that 10 years, it was actually probably more active than ever. You had Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay going, and of course, you had Warhammer Total War, making probably a bigger fan base for this than it ever existed previously. And also you had things like Skaven Tide. So the game was quite, and you had people like me running 8th edition tournaments. And a bunch of other folks. So the game may have been not in print, but I think the setting certainly was alive and well during that period.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the best way I would describe it is you're medieval. Just go to medieval, like the Earth, and then just add orcs and goblins and elves and stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You know, it's just Tolkien rewritten a bit. But like Val says, with all of that history, they did put a lot of extra gubbins in. There's a lot of fun fantasy races like Skaven, which are rat men. There's lizardmen, although those aren't technically, we'll get to this later, but they're not technically in the game. And like Val just referenced as well, there was a moment, because this was a game or a setting that was produced by Games Workshop for about 30 years. There was a 10-year hiatus where they literally blew it up. They ended the universe, and then they started a new game system, and then it's returned about 2 years ago. So
that's right.
Just to put that into some context, it's like a pastiche, right? Like the setting is that they're to the north, there is chaos and evil that is going to invade, but that doesn't mean that you aren't also very scared of, to the east, maybe there are the undead, because you're very traditionally rooted in the Empire, which is German kind of like states, really, or Germanic style, like European states.
Holy Roman Empire era. Yep.
Yeah. And then that's where you're like kind of based. So like when I say to the east, it's the vampires. It's like, you know, Eastern Europe. Then to the west, you've got the French, which is Bretonia. So it's very like, you will completely understand it as soon as you see it, I think is the right saying. The setting we're currently in, though, because there is a very long timeline, is that we are in a time just before the war for chaos, right?
That's right. So there are, in this world, you have the chaos waste to the north, and the, you know, on a fairly consistent timeline, the chaos, or the ultimate bad guys, if you're familiar with any Warhammer, will come south, and they will invade the less chaotic peoples. And we are in right now a lull in between these chaotic incursions. So in the world and the setting right now, magic plays a part of that. The winds of magic are where obviously magic comes from, and they are at a sort of an ebb right now. And so we're in a time of relative quietness and stability, sort of a calm before the storm in the setting. And this is actually leading up to what is known as the Great War Against Chaos. And sort of the penultimate incursion with chaos before the end times, where the bad guys in fact win.
So there's rat men, lizard men, dark elves, high elves. There's warriors of chaos. There's evil. There's the French. There's the Chinese. There's a lot of different peoples in it. I guess the kind of next question is, I guess the big question is if you are new to Warhammer, that should answer at least some of the questions about the old world. If you're jumping over from 40K or Age of Sigmar, how would you say that they relate to either of those two? Would you think? How do you think the old world relates to 40K or AOS? Because they're not the same. For 40K, it's not the same universe at all, although there are conversations about there being a connection through the warp, because they share the evil gods between them, right?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, the thing that they share is that both AOS and 40K have a common ancestor, and that's Warhammer Fantasy Battles. This was the first game. And so basically all the concepts that we explained, which was that sort of pastiche idea, which creates all of these interesting factions, were then it became, Warhammer, 40,000 was literally space orcs was the name of was the name of orcs when they made their way over to 40K. And so you will see a lot of parallels, elves and Eldar and things like that. And it's just sort of a similar idea. And then because we're talking about, a 40-year timeline of developing lore and developing stories and backstories and making all of these things unique to their settings, they then diverged from there. And AOS, for example, comes from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Literally, it's the next thing that happens when the world ends is Age of Sigmar. So a lot of the factions make the transition from the setting of the Warhammer Fantasy planet to the realms of Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, Age of Sigmar has got like a lot of similarity. And in fact, it's a place where not only you can pick up models, but you also pick up like maybe where characters eventually went, or so you do have this kind of like continuing old conversation. There is, unfortunately, if you get into the old world, some people who will generate friction between the two. A lot of that's to do with a lot of upset from the end of the Warhammer Fantasy Battle and the launch of Age of Sigmar, which was handled very badly by the company. But I know Age of Sigmar people who play both systems, and they all will play both systems. And also, I generally tend to find they're very respectful of each other. So it's just internet people, so I won't be too stressed about that personally.
So, like, I mean, one thing cannot be understated, which is just how poorly the end of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, back in 2015 was handled. So it was just done in a really almost disrespectful way to its customers, really dismissive way, and replaced with a game that was very, very different in nature to the one that people had loved, and also the way that the lore was wound up. There's all kinds of issues that caused, I think, some for some people, a form of fandom trauma was the end times, like Alderaan blowing up. So I can understand some of that, but I think ultimately Age of Sigmar is a player base that I think developed pretty organically after the end times, comprised, I think, somewhat of people who did play Warhammer Fantasy. But for the most part, I think AOS is kind of its own thing, and it's its own scene and its own game, and it's developing along doing it in its own way. So I think there's room for both of these games. And I think a lot of the player base for Fantasy are returning players who actually just left Games Workshop entirely, or people who got into the video game, and when they went to go play it on the tabletop because they thought that was a cool idea, discovered that, oh, this game doesn't actually exist anymore. This world that I like doesn't exist anymore. So I think Old World is kind of a developing and distinct player base from AOS and 40K.
Yeah, we're going to talk about rules in a bit, though, but it's also different in that both AOS and 40K are round-based games, which, like,
that's a big deal.
Mechanically work different. They also come from a different. It also comes from a different department inside of Games Workshop as well.
Yes,
there is main studio, or Marvel Studio, some people call it, and then there's also the SDS. So they make Old World, Heresy, Blood Bowl, and Necromunda as an example. So it's different portion of the
specialist design, the specialist design studio. So these are sort of the spin-off games to the main universes of 40K and AOS. SDS handles Horus Heresy, which is like a prequel to 40K, and I guess Old World in a lot of ways now is the prequel to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, and there's also a kind of like a much larger conversation, which we won't cover now. In the Age of Sigmar and 40K are probably more going down a more accessible board game style route, whereas the SDS part of the company are trying to develop what I think you would think of as a more traditional war game. I think the best way to think of it is a war recreation or recreation, but with with realistic bouncing cannonballs, and you're like, okay, but also unrealistic elves and dwarfs. So there's a pinch of salt when I say realistic, but there's an attempt to generate more verisimilitude in your gaming, and the other one is meant to be easier to pick up, play, and put on the table. So I think that there are different philosophies as well. So Old World is definitely a philosophy of being definitely more involved, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and there's I would describe that as there's a higher degree of fidelity in the rules and less abstraction. So where a lot of things in 40K and AOS might be represented by one grandiose mechanic, like something that will and you sort of imagine what happens. And in Old World and Horus Heresy and games that are designed perhaps more like Games Workshop games were in the sort of the 90s and early 2000s, actually up until very recently, really up until Age of Sigmar. You have a lot of mechanics that detail how very specific things happen. And as a result, though, you get these very vivid games where lots can turn on the roll of a dice. And so it does present a sort of a very different feel on the tabletop to the 40K and AOS, which are both great games, obviously.
Absolutely. Okay, so what armies could you play? And I kind of touched on these already. What armies could you play in the Old World? This is where we bring up a kind of contentious issue in that there are both official and unofficial, according to the company, armies. Although the general player base pretty much is the unofficial, or they're called Legacy. We sometimes refer to them as Renegades. Armies. We always refer to them as that. They are, like, we just consider them to be part of the setting. Although, just to be cautious and be aware, there is a split between the two. So do you want to take us through off the dome? You challenged yourself earlier. This is straight off the top. Core factions.
Off the top. Okay, so we got for the good guys, we've got the Empire of Man.
Humans.
We've got
with cannons.
They're humans with cannons. We got Bretonia.
We've got
French Knights. We've got Cathay.
Chinese balloon specialists.
balloon specialists. We've got with Chaos. We've got the Beastmen. We've got
Goatmen. They're just goats.
They live in the forest, and they're pretty scary. We've obviously got the Warriors of Chaos themselves. Those are the folks coming down from the north.
Armored men.
That's right. We've got a little bit more of just sort of your destruction, or your I guess chaotic neutral would be your orcs and goblins. And then they've also have,
and they've got a fella that they dress in wings and throw them at people.
Yes, and orcs and goblins is cool because it's really two armies, because both the goblins and the orc element of that are very well defined. And then there's also trolls in there. So a lot of these armies are actually really
armies,
big.
Really?
Yeah, there's like big tents in a lot of these armies, whereas Chaos are like that too. And then we also have the Tomb Kings, who are undead flavor, are dry
Egyptians.
Undead Egyptians, that's correct. Dusty undead, I believe. That rounds out our core faction. I didn't say the elves. We have dwarves. I apologize. Mm-hmm. Another good faction, and then we have the high elves.
Those are regular dwarfs, right? Drinking beer, long beards, have grudges. Yes. Dwarfs,
grumpy and stodgy types who live in mountains, but they do have good tech apparently. Mm-hmm. And then we have the haughty high elves on Ulthuan, who are your British aristocrats, I suppose, of the setting. Mm-hmm. And then we have your wood elves. Which hippies. Would be your but kind of evil hippies, though.
And you can also take tree bed.
Yes, and within that army too, you have both you have the people who live in the forest, and then you have the forest itself, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, so those are the core factions that you're able to take, and then there are the as we said, renegade / legend factions, which are
the renegade factions are Chaos Demons of Chaos.
Spooky nightmares. They are basically the guys from who is it that steals dreams from the kids? I can't remember. Monsters University, those guys, but evil.
Yes, they are from the immaterial realm. They are from where magic comes from, and they materialize if everyone's feeling anxious. There would be, for example, our current timeline, lots of demons running around. And then we have the Chaos Dwarfs, who are the evil twisted version of the stodgy
survivors. The survivors. Survivors. Okay. Not evil. Famous capitalists known for their forced labor. Those guys are interesting. And then out by them, we also have the Ogre Kingdoms, the big boys. Rob's working on Ogre Kingdoms now. The lumpen. They're meant to represent the soft proletariat, unwilling to fight and only interested in hunger.
That's right. They are starving, man.
Yeah, starving.
And then we have the vampire counts, which are all of your Halloween spooky horror tropes. The wet undead, you might call them. But again, that one is like three different armies all rolled into one. Just a fabulous faction. We've got one of the coolest, most unique factions in the setting. We have Skaven,
Ratmen,
who are the Ratmen, people-sized rats who live in an under empire and cause a lot of issues for people, but have very short lifespans and are kind of their own worst enemies at all times. The Skaven are a fabulous faction. And then we also have the Lizardmen.
Yeah, Aztec dinosaurs who sometimes ride other dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs riding dinosaurs, perhaps one of the most instantly understandably cool things in the world, the Lizardmen, led by their giant floating sorcerer frog toad guys, the Slan, which are fabulous. And then, of course, everyone's assuming I'm going to forget the Dark Elves. But I didn't forget the Dark Elves. The Dark Elves are your twisted, sadistic spin-off faction from the High Elves, the yin or the yang to them. And I believe that's everybody. Did I miss someone?
I don't know off the top of our heads. If we did, leave us comments below. It's great for engagement. So let's just say yes. Now, a good question you're going to ask us is, Rob, Val, why are all of those very iconic armies in Legends? In the link below, Pachow, will be a 12-hour video essay that me and Val are putting together on this exact subject. But for now, let's just say politics and capitalism. Let's just put it that way and leave it for a later date.
My personal hope is that it also comes down to logistics at some level. So they had to, because obviously this game was complete. Like we just rattled off 17, 18 factions, I think, with Cathay. Regardless, a good amount. I think, so I think we're up to 18. with Cathay. But either way, the 17 with Cathay. Yes. Every time I do mental math on this show, I get comments, a DM to me that people find it hilarious. And that is fair. That is completely fair. But my hope is that logistically, too, relaunching this game, what we just rattled off even in those core factions, it's a lot of minis. It's a lot of stuff that needed to be reboxed and published and put out. So my hope is that in future editions, we'll start to see those legacy factions come officially into the fold. And I don't know if we really did say what has been said about it is that essentially for the rules of this game, you've got a few books where all the army lists are. You've got two of them. You've got the Forces of Fantasy and you've got Ravening Hordes, and that's where you will find your good guys versus your bad guys. And then there were also for what they called the legacy factions PDFs that were published, and they are available for free online. You can go to Games Workshop and download them. And those PDFs are sort of get you by rules that they released, just in case people who had those factions wanted to play. The problem with them is that they do not seem to have been fully cooked. They were not developed as completely as the core factions were. And so out of the box, they're not so great. I will plug the Renegade Legacy Pack, which is something that we've been developing over, I guess, around the last year.
We'll definitely bring this back when we start talking about the rules in more detail.
Oh, my bad. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You continue.
So we're going to focus on the setting for a moment. So,
yes. All right.
So last question about the setting before we go any further, and I'm fascinated in what other people think about this. What is the setting and lore like? Is it dark? Is it gritty? Is it kind of like, is it fun? Is it, would you say that it's the Grimdark of the far future? Or is it, do you know what I mean? Like, what, if you had to kind of encapsulate it, what do you think that they're going for?
I would say it really does depend on how you access it. But I would say that because it is sort of a middle fantasy. I mean, it's not Game of Thrones where like magic is sort of on the edges. Like magic is very present in this world, but it does feel a lot more grounded in the sense that you could sort of see yourself as a peasant afraid of the forest that's filled with evil creatures and beastmen. And I think because of that, like there is, I don't know, for me, I can see it as a place where actual people live. Whereas sometimes I think in 40K it's hard to think of like what does a jobber look like in 40K? Like it's just a person who's like going to work, like who's not in the Imperial Guard or whatever. There's not a lot of that. Whereas in this game, I do feel, and this may be the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay roots that it has, which is developed alongside this game all the way. It does feel a lot more grounded, a lot more lived in, and to me a very vivid place where all sections of the world are sort of interesting areas that you can, explore and build narratives in.
I mean, it specifically has a map, not only both in Total War, but also on like one of the Warhammer Old World microsites. So you can literally like see the journey that different like nations and cultures take in their kind of like constant ever battle, and it's told over a long time period. It's not we're always at war. Sometimes the Tomb Kings are invading. Next time there's an Orc and Goblin expansion. Next time Wood Elves have got mad and they're starting to attack everyone for chopping down a tree. So there's definitely like swaths, like there's bad guys and good guys at certain points. I feel it ranges, and I think you're right. Like there is sometimes like good whimsical elements to it, like, and then and we can definitely have tons of whimsy. So if you're someone who's like, I'm a whimsical fellow, or lady, or MB, or whatever, can I be whimsical in this setting? Absolutely is the answer. But also, I'm grim and I love black metal, and I hate the outside. You're like, like you can also like do like the most twisted, dark, horrible stuff. You could even you can even become one of those people who's very much like, no, they're from Middenheim, so they wear only this outfit. Obviously, as long as you don't impose that on someone else, but you got the opportunity to really like get wild with it, right? And be on your own journey. So I do think it's broad, and I think Games Workshop does a good job of doing that with most of their settings anyway. But this does feel more lived in.
Yeah, I think that's the and that might just be also an extension of the fact that it's a fantasy universe rather than like a science fiction universe or the sort of more high-minded AOS universe. This is a place, and that place also happens to look a lot like Earth. So yeah, I do feel like there's a groundedness to it that makes it fun for me to imagine these armies battling. Like you can kind of comprehend the scale and power of a dragon, whereas like a massive titan stomping around, is kind of tough to wrap your brain around.
Yet, wait till they build them robots up. Like, yeah, they're getting better at those. So.
Well, I think Gunpla has a giant one in Japan. So there you go.
Yeah, we got that going. All right. So the next section, chapter 2, if you will, is on the community, because I think that's one of those big reasons that people want to get together. Like they want to start playing games, which is something we're really focused on this show, is you actually playing the game. That's the point of the video. And it's like, well, what's the community like if I was to jump in and get involved? I think that's a really fair question. And obviously, if you have any thoughts, again, do leave them below so new people can read them. So I guess the first question is, what's the vibe of the community, Val? What do you reckon the vibe is?
Again, this is going to depend on how you're engaging with it, but I would say in person, especially people who are actually showing up and playing this game, a lot of them are folks who really, really wanted it to come back, right? So like they're just very excited to have the chance to play this game, and I'm still seeing that when Rob and I both run a lot of events, so like tournament style events, and it's been really cool to see how people approach playing at those events, and a lot of it is just getting an army out. It isn't necessarily the most, powerful, but what they want to have built, maybe something they've always wanted to have, something that they missed opportunity to do. And then there's the totally net new players as well, who are just excited to, be playing the game in the setting that they like the best. So I would say overall, like the in-person, I've made a lot of new friends with Warhammer: The Old World. And I'd say it's quite and because it's a growing and new community, at least in my experience, people are very welcoming. People are very, helpful because they want more players to play against. Mm. So I think, if there are any seeds of a community where you are, if there is a group, getting on its feet, maybe just a handful of players or whatever, joining in is a great way to start adding to that and get that to try and get like a group of players going that so that way that you can get games and that the game feels alive where you are.
Yeah, I'd say the community's got a great vibe, especially I'm personally finding it like there's either very experienced veteran hobbyists who've been in it a long time, but also a bunch of new people jumping in from new game systems or who wanted to play it when I was a kid and they're excited to come back out. And what's really fun is seeing those two communities like merge together, and you get that enthusiasm, passion from people just starting out and people who like, I've got all these tips and tricks and these things that I can kind of share with you, which is really exciting. So I think the vibe feels very, very progressive. The vibe feels very cool. I haven't seen any kind of like bad actors. Culture war stuff is generally taken to 40K. That's the battleground for culture war stuff. So you don't tend to find any of that overly happening inside of the old world, which is quite nice. All of the kind of content creators and people who I see are very open. They're very chill. They're very much for helping people learn how to play or getting people into the hobby, and they're very passionate. So it doesn't seem to be very much of like that kind of grift economy that you sometimes can find as well.
Yeah, it's excited. Like I think and that's what's cool. And we do a survey. We had our first one last year. We're going to do another one this year. But that was what one of my big takeaways from that was just like the excitement level for this game is very high amongst those people who are playing it. I hope that has been sustained. And yeah, I think that's why if you are able to find pockets of players who want to join in, I think. That's what you'll discover, especially if you get out to an event. There's lots of if you don't have anything in your local scene, there's lots of GTs that have been appearing, and those are great places to go and just see the game in action and play amongst committed players, which is great. The level of hobby I've seen out there is very high in the sense that people take a lot of pride in their armies and their work. Yeah. Because it's a slower game from a release pace perspective, although not tremendously slow. We usually get content every couple of months. I also feel like there's not as much shifting around in what people bring or the armies that are being built, which is I think makes it a little easier.
I'd like to touch on that point. I think Val's point there is like if you get a human with a spear for the Empire, probably that will exist for as long as the game will ever exist. Probably.
Yes.
Like a cannon may eventually become maybe a slightly bigger cannon. I don't know. Like the Cathay cannon is much bigger than the Empire cannon. But the skeletons, for instance, for Two Kings, their old models probably need replacing at some point. But probably they'll just get replaced with skeletons with either hand weapon and shield or spears. So you probably, if you do some hobby at this point, which we're going to touch on later as well, but like if you do some hobby, it's going to last a very long time. So you can take your time. Whereas with those kind of easy to get into games, like AOS and 40K, it can feel like they're very transient. Like they're very likely to maybe fall off or not be something you see around a lot. But that's not necessarily true. They've got some old kits in there as well.
There's a lot of planned obsolescence in those games. And what's also interesting too, especially with Old World, is that because it's a game that's very much, I mean, we talked about the narrative being a pastiche, but the rules are a pastiche too of previous editions that came before it. There were 8 editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And so there are also 8 other versions of this game you can play. In addition to fan-generated ones, so like this game, and also the miniatures can be used in just other rank and flank systems. So as far as like a war game that you can sink your teeth into, and like if you don't like where it's at here, or maybe your local isn't playing this particular version of it, it's still very usable, like with the stuff that you get and you build.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so is the community big and is it growing? Is it on the decline? Is it the same stagnant old people that are into it in the past, or is it growing? What are your thoughts?
So I guess, again, when we looked at this last year, we saw that about 75% of the people were folks who had played fantasy in the past. And then about a quarter of them were just completely new to the game, which surprised me. I mean, some people might think that's a low number. To me, that was a really high number, because when this was marketed, it was marketed as a game for, people who were searching for some remember berries, some nostalgia, grognards or whatever, and that, almost like actively discouraged new players from joining the game. And that was, I think, kind of ignored. Lots of people have been coming to the game from, either other Games Workshop games or also just outside of tabletop. Mm-hmm. I've met recently at, the event that I just ran, there were at least a couple of players that had never played a tabletop game like this before, had fully painted armies, that they developed over the last year. So like that's really, really cool. It's a totally new way to come in. So it's new players, new and old, familiar with tabletop and not familiar as well.
Yeah, I think the community is big and it is growing significantly. You see this a lot from the very early days when we, literally first week or 2 of the game being out, I was running events. And I have, in like the UK where I'm based, I have now seen like little event organizers popping up all up around and down the country, and those events growing in size as well. And while player base isn't the only indication of community size, it's a good indication of community size. And then also, obviously, we make lots of videos, and those videos also do very well. Now, this also, it might just be because me and Val are hilarious, and obviously that's true. But very handsome. But it could be that also the amount of people who are trying to access this information is also increasing, which I think is also true as well. So I think, like, if you take those things together, I would argue the community is growing, and I'm saying it's growing quite a lot, which brings us into our next question, which is how big is it compared to the other? How big is the game compared to the other games? So I'd like to take the lead on this one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
40K is obviously this kind of like interesting barnstormer of a game, in that 40K really doesn't represent the rest of the miniatures universe. I've often referred to, or recently started referring to 40K as a meme, in that like it's almost separate to miniature wargaming, and if it's its own universe. You're like, I like 40K. You're like, great. Have you heard of anything else? I guess it's the same way of people being like, I've read Game of Thrones. I'm like, great. Have you read any other books? And they're like, no. Are there other books?
Harry Potter, maybe.
Maybe Harry Potter. I've read. I love Harry Potter. Cool. Have you read any other books? No. Okay. Like that doesn't really come into this conversation. So it's nowhere near 40K, obviously. But I guess its comparison is, how does it stack up against something like Age of Sigmar? And in my opinion, for now, it's not as big as Age of Sigmar, but I expect in the next couple of years for it to overtake Age of Sigmar, which feels like a bold claim. But if there's someone who knows about that, it would be me, because I also do lots of information about Age of Sigmar all the time. And that's what I would expect in the next couple of years, which I think maybe Val is surprised by that statement. I don't know. But that's my expectation in the next couple of years.
We've had already a number of videos that were, I think, titled "Will it be bigger than 40K?" And I don't know if it has that upside, just because of the sci-fi versus fantasy sort of thing. Like sci-fi tends to be a little bit more popular in our day and age. But I would say this: like if we're looking at like active player base, It does feel as though Old World, in its young 2 years of life, has already clawed to a similar standing to Age of Sigmar from active players out there. And also that includes content that we see and the amount of engagement that we get, and also indications from the company itself. We've seen in the last shareholder update, Old World was listed as one of the 4 universes that Games Workshop essentially exists in, and as we've mentioned, that's Old World, Horse Heresy, 40K, and AOS. So it's sort of a fourth leg to the Games Workshop table. And then, of course, the biggest, beefiest leg by a mile is Warhammer 40,000. I think it is true to say that people don't like wargaming so much as they like Warhammer in a lot of cases. It is almost a monopoly in the space, and it does take up a lot of the oxygen. Old World is I guess a growing piece of that Warhammer pie, which would mean that outside of the Games Workshop environment, if you compared it to anything that wasn't Games Workshop, I think this would easily be one of the largest tabletop war games out there, just bar none. Like even up against other games that are essentially supported, like the entire effort of them is an entire company's output. Looking at like things like Kings of War and Conquest and stuff like that. I think Old World probably immediately surpassed those by a country mile. And this will all depend on where you are locally. But indications, activity, engagement online, all that kind of stuff, engagement in tournaments do suggest a growing and very alive game. And if it doesn't exist where you are, that just means that it hasn't caught on yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's. I think to finish this off, I think a lot of people really want to know what a community is like because they want to get involved in the community, but also they want to know if a game is growing because is it worth investing a lot of time and money? Like, is this just something that's going to be throwaway? Like you might say with some Games Workshop, other kind of skirmishy style games like Warcry, Underworld, stuff like that. Is that worth getting into? In some areas, I know before I get shouted at that those are super popular with massive events and lots of people attending. But in other places, most places, they're not. So sometimes there are little pockets. So knowing that the game is growing, the community is growing, and it's getting bigger is, I think, something that people kind of need to hear. And we got no reason to say that other than that's just the truth, right? If it was the other way around, we'd be like, get into the game, you suckers. All right.
No, I think it is definitely something worth like if you're worried about is this game going to be around, and also I think that's a fair concern. They blew it up the last time. But I think if there's a concern of like, does this game have legs? Does it have staying power? I think the fact that it survived the company actually trying to destroy it, like literally tear it up and throw it away, it survived that, and it's back now with enthusiasm. And we can get into some other signs as to why you should believe in this game being around for the long term. But I'd say Games Workshop calling it one of its 4 core games, I think is a really good indication that at least the company believes in it. And if the company believes in it, that's probably because they've been selling a lot of it. So that's good.
Absolutely. Okay, so chapter 3. Okay, so how do you get started and playing the game? Okay, so the first question that I'm going to ask is how would you overview or explain the gameplay to someone? Like, how would we go through explaining what we think the game looks like to play and how just that very simple bit. What is a quick overview? Start out with it's 5 or 6 turn game. Basically, you get points for killing stuff or standing near some objectives or killing some cabbage trains, and you have ranked units, infantry, cavalry. Sometimes you have monsters. There's some magic to do. There's shooting and there's little ballistic missile shooting. There's magic missile shooting. There's artillery shooting, and you go have a big fight and you kill each other's stuff. I'd say that's an overview.
Yeah, I'd say that's a decent overview. I would say I think one of the reasons why I connect to this game really well, and I think again it speaks to its groundedness, is that we may not have been in a fight with Space Marines with laser beams and such, but we can imagine 2 armies running full speed at each other because that has been represented, I think, in Hollywood a lot of times. So, like those epic moments in things like Braveheart or whatever, like two aligned forces, and the better seasons of Game of Thrones, 2 big forces lined up, going for a fight, mechanically, that's the way it looks. So on the table, the game is very dramatic, and I think although they are square ranked up bricks of units and things like that, it is very vivid to me when the game is going on, and you do have this sense of a real battle happening on the field, which makes it a lot of fun. I think the theater of the mind in it is really, really cool.
Absolutely. That's the simplest way to think of it and I think one of the successes of Warhammer Fantasy and the Old World, and one of the reasons I think it will continue to grow, is because of its complete table readability. You can walk up to a table of the Old World and you know what's going on. You know that's a dragon. You know that's a cannon. You know those guys have got spears. You get it. From a table read, which is a massive shout out to both the miniatures designers and the setting designers, but also because they've just lifted traditional history and just put it on a tabletop. So
it's visceral.
It's very visceral. Okay,
and also because of that, I think, I don't know how things are in Age of Sigmar, but I know in 40K, when you look at a table of 40K these days, just because of how that game has developed and evolved over time, it's a lot of terrain. So usually when you look at a table of 40K being played, you see a bunch of varying quality degrees of ruins, of things to be fought in and on and around. Whereas in a game of Old World, you're literally not allowed to put terrain smack dab in the middle of the board. So the thing that really leads the game is the armies that are on the table, and they are the core focus is the actual army rather than the terrain and the board that you're playing on, which, I mean, you can still make very nice and things like that, but there's just a lot more space on the board for gameplay and for the armies and the models that you put a lot of effort into. So I love it for that.
Okay, next question. So how many models or points do I need to start playing a game, or how many do people need? A full game is 2,000 points, although there's kind of a weird conversation around that at the moment. We'll ignore that for the moment. But if you're a beginner...
a normal game, as they say, a normal game would be played at 2,000 points.
A point normative game would be played at 2,000 points. But can you start playing at a smaller points value? Do I need to jump in at 2,000 points? Can I play 500 points? Can I play 1,000 points? What's going on there?
I'd say, to Games Workshop's credit, they've offered a lot of sort of smaller steps to join in on the games. So you do this, you see that in 40K and AOS, and in Old World, I guess last winter they released a free PDF which included a little mission that sparked an idea called Foray, which is something that Rob has been developing and is being played all over. And those are 500-point games, so about a quarter of the size of a full game. And then in our most recent Arcane Journal, there was an expansion of that concept into something that Games Workshop calls Battle March. And that would be that small format game, 500 to 750 points of models, and played on a sort of a smaller area of the table as well. It's not played on the full area of the table. And you get these cool little armies that are a great way, I think, to learn the mechanics of the game and still get a really good feel for what Old World is about as you develop and grow towards maybe getting to that 2,000 point army, or maybe you never do. Maybe you build a couple of these smaller forces, and that's the fun that you have. And I think that can totally stand up on its own legs.
Yeah, I think the 500-point factor, I've run events doing it. It's very playable. It's very achievable. You can learn how to play the game. I think, we're going to talk about hobby in the bit, but 2,000 points is an intimidating, especially if you're new, intimidating amount of stuff to build, paint, put together. So that can be very stressful. I completely understand that. 500 points is also a really nice investiture if you just want to find out if you like it. It's that simple. You don't necessarily need to get a lot of buyer's remorse. They have battalion boxes. We can talk about that in a bit as well. But, you can just buy one box, basically, have most of the stuff you need to play like a small format game, try it with your friends. We've put a pack online that's free. We'll link it below, and then you can try. So you don't need to jump up to 2,000 points. But when you get to 2,000 points, what's exciting is there is a tax, so this thing in the rules called core. So the armies are broken up into characters, which you take a certain percentage of. Core, which you need 25% of. And then you have special and rare. So these are restricted units. What's really fun about the need is it gives armies identity. Also, it gives the game designers the ability to break that rule by changing how much core you need, what types of core you need. Like with Troll Horde, you need trolls as an example. So there's some fun stuff there, but it gives you an identity to how an army looks. So armies look how you kind of expect them to, versus while I really like the freedom you get in other systems like AOS and 40K, you can just spam a thing or take a theme of a thing. This definitely creates an identity, which I think is cool.
Yeah. And they are able to actually give you opportunities to create those really focused and themed armies through creating different army lists, right? So you have basically every army will have its grand army basic army list, and then there are what they call armies of infamy, which are remixes of those options that may or may not give you benefits, etc., to theme a little more specifically. So yeah, I think that the way that they do set up how armies are constructed is good. And another thing that's maybe a little controversial is that they, yes, you have to take 25% core. You're also allowed to take up to half characters. And I think I do think a big reason for that is because of restarting the game, characters tend to be more expensive per model. And so you can spend a good portion of your list on sort of more powerful individual pieces. And that means that you don't necessarily have to have a ton of models to start that 2,000 point game. You can have a couple of big monsters, you can have some powerful characters, and then sprinkle that into other units as well. So it does sort of lower, I think, that bar of entry to get to the bigger points games, which then as you go on and you start building out bigger units for your infantry or wherever your heart takes you, you can start doing that. But the actual the bar, I think, is reachable even for the larger game if you do enjoy how it works at the smaller points, or you just dive right into the big one.
Yeah, exactly. How long does a game take?
That depends on you. I think in the early
Never
goings,
mind. I'll never ask you a question again. It depends. If you're playing an event, a game takes no more than 3 hours. It can take you less. Right?
Yes, that's an event. I think in the early goings, if you're just learning this game, it's going to take you more than 3 hours. Once you're really, really good at it, it's going to take you less than
2,000 points.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're playing 2,000 points, yes, sure. With your learning, it's going to take you ages. If you're just dicking around with your friend, maybe 2 weeks.
It could take months. As long as you like is the answer on that one. But yes, sorry, Rob, you're right. At an event, 3 hours. But a lot of people actually don't enjoy playing the game in 3 hours. A lot of people like to enjoy shooting the shit, having a good time, and spending a whole afternoon or whatever, getting to a thing, or leaving their stuff on the table and coming back to it whenever they damn well please. But yes, if you're pushing it, 2 experienced players, I think one of the great things about this game is that 2 experienced players can actually get maybe more than one game done in 3 hours.
Yes.
Because of the fact that you're not moving all of these individual skirmish units. Your units are actually on trays. So once you have an army and it's actually set up on a table and deployed, it moves quick. And once you have a handle of the rules, it can actually go. The pace is actually really, really good. And you can play a game very efficiently.
It's also mechanically not very tiring. You don't tend to roll lots and lots of dice. 10 attacks is a lot of attacks. So you won't be. I just played a Horus Heresy event this weekend, and my guys had 35 attacks, and I felt so tired at the end of that event. I was like, oh my god. Whereas in Old World, you don't really roll that many dice. You're not moving as many models, as many individual bits around like you are doing with the main studio games, which I think is a good point. And yeah, an event is 3 hours. You can easily play it if you get good enough in less than 3 hours. And if you're shooting the shit, it can be as long as you like it to be, which is nice. And because there aren't
Rob, it depends.
It does depend, but I'm trying to look for some answers, right? Some answers with context. That's it. Let's say, okay. Right. Next question. What books do I absolutely need to buy? Well, it depends.
No, it doesn't.
No, if you can't read, no books. Okay? So it does depend, actually. All right, so this is the format for how you get books in the Old World is there's a core rule book, which now on the Warhammer community website has FAQ updates. That's where all the updates are. Then, in addition, there are two core books: Forces of Fantasy and Forces of Destruction. Is that it? No?
Ravening Hordes.
Ravening Hordes. That's it. Ravening Hordes, and then there are also free PDFs for the Legend Armies. After that, we have now started to get these 48-page updates called Arcane Journals. And they either introduce Armies of Infamy, which is like a new way to play a certain army. Orcs and Goblins is a good example. You can play Troll Horde or a Nomadic War. And then we've now started to go into a new kind of generation where we're starting to get new units and stuff introduced. This is kind of like a new thing, which is only happening in a couple of weeks, really, or a couple of months whenever the Chaos stuff comes out. But that's the format. So if you wanted to collect Tomb Kings, as an example, there is a Tomb Kings, there's a book. There is also then a Tomb Kings Arcane Journal. And there's also a page that you potentially need from another book. Now, having multiple books is something I know a lot of people get stressed out by, coming from other systems or other complaints. You also never need to buy the books. They're definitely readily available online. You never need to pick them up if you don't want to. There are good army builder apps like Old World Army Builder, like New Recruit. So there's great places to go find all of the rules and how they work without ever having to pick up a book. I personally like the Arcane Journals because we get more lore and more stuff. But
there's always fun stuff to look at in them. There's more lore. There's the army, cool army pictures. They've actually been building neat little terrain and set pieces for putting stuff in these. So yeah, I would say that the Arcane Journals are fun, but they can feel like a bit of a subscription tax to people, I think, for keeping up with the game. I do buy them, but I don't think you necessarily have to.
Nope.
As Rob mentioned, there are some really great online tools, including toe.whfb.app, which is actually all of the rules in one handy place that you can read. We'll include that in the didgeridoo below, as well as the list builders that Rob explained there. So for having the game, I would say that actually using a lot of the digital tools are actually superior because they're up to date. You don't have to have your core rule book and then reference a printed out errata or what have you. You don't have to go through and do some edits. It's all up to date when you use the digital community-based stuff. That being said, I think a lot of people love having a rule book. You know, they like having the tangible things. I know I do. I like just the way they look on my shelf, to be quite frank. So yeah, you can go either way on that one. But it is, I don't think by any stretch is it a requirement to invest in 1 billion books to get off the ground. You can get into this game, without ever picking up a book.
Absolutely. Also, just in case we weren't clear, your main army rules are in one of those two big books or a PDF, and then additional army rules are in Arcane Journals. I just want to be really specific.
And as things continue from here, really since so Cathay was released in an Arcane Journal. It's not in Forces of Fantasy or Ravening Hordes. And as Rob mentioned, there was a book that came out that featured some extra stuff for Cathay, and then there was a book after that has a little bit of something for dwarves, has a little bit of something for Tomb King. So as things progress, it is going to get kind of scattered and tough to figure out where all of the rules are that you might need, and that will get that sort of that tends to be how Warhammer editions go, though. You get what people call bloat, and then eventually they'll reset things in the future and consolidate stuff again.
Not that I think that's what this is.
You don't think it's rules bloat?
No, I don't think it is at all. I think it's exciting expansion. That would be like describing D&D as campaign books as rules bloat, which it depends if they're necessary. And the important part is, I think, is they're not necessary.
Correct.
So,
yes. And each book includes stuff that's adjacent to, there's campaign mechanic and terrain generators, and there's just all kinds of fun stuff in them. I think they are of good quality, and I enjoy them. So no doubt.
Yeah. So next question is, how difficult is it to learn? Well, it depends, I guess. But yeah, how difficult is this to learn in comparison? I think the best point maybe is comparing it to other systems. What do you think? What do you reckon?
I think it would have a higher learning curve than a 40K or an AOS. to get your head around everything. I think it's helpful to have someone who maybe has a familiarity with the rules, or maybe yourself having familiarity with Warhammer in the past. But it's not. I mean, it's nothing. You know, if Warhammer is something that interests you, I think that learning rules is just something you're willing to do. If you're willing to build and paint miniatures, and you're willing to find a tabletop that you can even play on, and do all that kind of stuff. Rules are just another part of a really engaging hobby, a way to spend your time. So they are more crunchy and they're not as straightforward. I would say that is a fair thing to say about them. But ultimately, they do play well once you have them enough in your head.
Yeah, I'd say that if you were trying to just read it straight out of the core rule book, that would be super challenging, very much like Star Wars Shatterpoint is. But actually, if you were to someone was to show you, you would learn in moments. This tray, it's got a movement value, it goes so far. Pretty easy. Then all you got to do is work out what steps you need to do stuff, and then you need to really work out what the numbers mean. So like reading straight from the book is so challenging. So if you're in a local community and you can find someone that's willing to give you like a demo game or take you through it, it's a much less frustrating process. If you're excited, it can take you, I mean, I read rules meticulously because it's our job. So like I read them meticulously, but still I switched off. I was fidgeting. It took me a long time to read the core rules, because it does. And those are the things but you can expedite that process for yourself, and it's much easier to learn with another person. And then that'll give you the enthusiasm to go read more stuff. That's what that'll do.
Yeah, and the other thing too, when you have like the degree of fidelity, so detail as we have in these rules, is like once you have your handle on the basics of how things work, you can figure out the details when it matters to you. Like especially when you're learning with friends and like you're amongst people who are just getting the game on its feet. You're gonna mess up a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't really matter. The game plays, and you can sort of figure out what should happen or what feels right on the table. I think especially when you're learning, you don't have to necessarily be super obsessed with having everything picture perfect and accurate. And I would say if that is a way you like to play a game, and having it like you like to have a really good handle on the rules, and you don't necessarily, believe it or not, I've found that like going to a tournament is actually a really great way to sort of do a crash course, because the players are, again, excited to have new people joining in, and will be very helpful. I would recommend you have a basic understanding, but if you want to take that next leap, playing in a tournament is a really great way to learn the nuance of the rules and the detail, if that's where you want to take it. And I think that's a really good thing. The other thing I can't recommend enough, and again, we'll put the link in the didgeridoo below, is Old World Builder has a wonderful thing that once you've built your army list, you can press a button and go into something called game mode, and that actually has all of your rules just for what's on the table set up for you on your phone. So that way it makes it very, very easy to reference your stat blocks, your abilities, and all that kind of stuff in the context of each unit. It's fantastic. And I think that would take a lot of the mental load of flipping pages and stuff away and make the game a lot more enjoyable for a lot of people. So I really, really shout out that feature is fantastic.
Okay, the final bit in the gaming section is what quick general list writing tips can we give?
In the current game, it's a little bit different. Rob, why don't you take it away? What would you say?
Well, I think if you're starting out, I think what you want to do is you want to try and access the ability to play in all phases. So if you do have an army that can have an artillery piece, just take it, even if it's rubbish. Not hell cannon. That's the one you're not allowed to take. Everything else, fine. Okay. If you can take a wizard, take one. If you can take a unit that's got a little bit of like some crossbowmen or longbows or something, just take it. A cavalry unit, take that as well. Like take if you're really starting really small, take units that are pretty similar actually. But once you want to start add a wizard in, then add a cannon in, add a bit in, try and work what's going on. Don't immediately go to things like a dragon or a big monster, because actually it can really skew a game if you and your friends are trying to learn. And instead, just start small. Start with like the maybe less impactful units, or the stuff that's really exciting for your army, like fanatics or a balloon.
Don't take a dragon, but take a balloon. Interesting.
Interesting. Well, you'll learn a lot of fucking universal special rules off a balloon.
They're all in there. They're all on it. So,
it's a one-stop shop for learning, actually. So,
yes.
Actually, maybe that's why they did it. Conspiracy theory.
Yes, that's right. Beginner friendly. That's fantastic. No, I really think that's sage advice. And another reason why starting at that lower points value is helpful because it does limit the size and power of the things that you can take, and it really allows you to learn those mechanics. Again, if you're looking for learning a game, and also you develop an affection for your army. The individuals in that army when it's a little bit smaller. They're a little less wheels. They're a little less cogs in the machine and have a little bit more personality when there's fewer of them on the table. I think that's a really good thing. I think something you pointed out about why you might not take a dragon in an early game or like the most powerful thing immediately is because if you're trying to learn, you can wind up accidentally ending the game very quickly. You are just trying to get your grip on the mechanics. The other thing is too is that when you're out there like learning, be upfront about that. So I think that behooves the opponent as well to maybe make it so that their list is a little bit more of a taste of everything to try and get more of a game where the outcome isn't the big deal, but more the enjoyment of learning and seeing how things actually work in space. Because as soon as you do get there, you're going to start thinking like, well, that wasn't very good. Maybe I want to do this, or maybe I want to do that. Maybe if I tweak this or brought that item and and now you're a Warhammer person and you're lost forever. That's one of the great things about this game versus maybe the AOS and 40K, the way that those games are designed now, which is a lot more
esports
like, but like they're kind of component based. You have pieces that you put together. You're still putting together a puzzle, but the pieces are much larger in that puzzle. Whereas in Old World, you get to decide, the weapons your heroes carry. You get to decide what magic items they might have. You get to decide, how your unit of general core troops is armed. Do they have swords, or do they have swords and shields, or do they have halberds? Etc. Like there's a lot of fun choices you get to make, a lot of meaningful choices you get to make and play with. So once you have a taste for how things work on the board, then you can have a lot of fun in list building and putting armies together.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll say before we move on to kind of the hobby part of getting into the old world is that in the summer of 2025, they released something called the Match Play Guide. In the Match Play Guide, this gave the capacity to have objectives on the board, as well as something called baggage trains, and also a big FAQ on top of the core rules and an additional bunch of missions. So this is, again, not mandatory, especially if you're just learning, but this is something extra. So maybe a list tip I would give you if you were playing Match Play Guide missions was if you got some infantry dudes, give them a short sword and a shield versus giving them a spear. Now, that's not necessarily always true, but it's kind of good advice because they get an extra save because of this update. So based off the core rules, there's also this update, Match Play Guide, and an FAQ, which changes some stuff around, specifically changes magic a little bit. It changes how little infantry blocks use a little bit, and it adds missions and different ways to score. So that's an additional thing that you'll need to know at some point, but maybe not now. But you might hear people reference it. The MPG.
MPG, Match Play Guide. Yes, it's good. And it creates other layers to play. Out of the rulebook, though, Warhammer Old World exists as what we might call a kill points game. So, like, it's literally the person who kills more of their opponent's army is the one who wins, and that is a perfectly fun and engaging way to play the game for a long time. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing those core rulebook missions out off the hop, and then adding complexity if that's interesting to you. That's it.
Okay, so chapter 4. Nice. I think is chapter 4 is we're going to talk about the hobby, and we're going to talk about how we can collect this if people are excited about this up until now. So we have covered this pretty extensively in a previous video, which we could maybe link, but you can go back and find. But the first thing we're going to talk about is which you think is and this is just a pure vibes feeling, which is the best army for a beginner to collect and paint.
I think I tried to say, what did I try to say before?
I tried to say Bretonia.
Bretonia. Oh, Bretonia's is up there. But for collecting and painting, oh man, I don't know. They all have their pros. Orcs is pretty awesome just because of how simple it is and how many different things you have to choose from. I don't know. I have almost all of them. So they all have a special place in my heart. I have the most fun. Yeah, I have most fun orcs and goblins. Actually, this is probably the thing I've done the most hobby on too. So yeah.
Okay, that's a great shout. I think Orcs and Goblins can be one of those intimidating armies in that there's lots of choices. You're like, am I getting a Wyvern? Am I getting the battalion box? Especially don't get the battalion box. It's not very good. Like I would say right now, it's really hard not to say just pick up the Cathay box. It's all new sculpts. You know, it's all new sculpts. It's so they're brand new. They're really good, high quality sculpts. It's very playable in the battalion box. All the new boxes coming out soon. Very playable.
Both of those together would be an exceptional, really, really exceptional start. Because you get characters in the reinforcement box. Yeah.
So I feel like that's one that is out there. Obviously, if you're like really, really new, low model count is good so that you don't hit barriers. You want to you just want to like don't have big eyes and a small stomach. Don't be like, I'm gonna do 900 dwarfs. I'm like, if you've never painted the beard on a dwarf, do that first. Go into your local hobby store and be like, can I practice? Oh, this sucks. Right? So just like, think about that. But we did do a big video about this in the battalion box video where we cover this in more detail, right?
And I think actually, I can't believe I blanked on this, but Warriors of Chaos, I think, was my actual answer on that one.
It was.
And that's because Warriors of Chaos, I think, paint up really well as a first army. The problem is they're the bad guys, so it's, I don't know, not always everyone's favorite flavor, but they have a really broad range, and also they take very well to cool paint technology like speed paints and contrast paints from Games Workshop. So there are techniques that you can use to get a really nice looking force on the table fairly quickly, I'd say.
Also, I'm going to now leave space for my friend Val to talk about one of his favorite subjects about SDS and Warhammer the Old World, in that if you decide you want to collect Warhammer the Old World, it's financially a great decision because
they deliver the value, I would say. Especially when you're comparing Old World versus other Games Workshop options, so that's Age of Sigmar or 40K, Old World is, I'd say, anywhere between half and 75% of the cost. So you're probably getting a discount of anywhere between 25 and 50% versus the main games, and that's just because of the way they sell it. So when they sell you a unit, you get a big unit. You get if it's a unit of core troops, often you're getting like 30 models in a box. The battalion boxes often, will have, sort of a cavalry and infantry and a war machine or a chariot or something extra alongside it. Characters do get expensive as always, but I think for as far as like the actual amount of stuff you get, like the total amount that you spend on that box is going to be very similar, but the amount that you get for what you spend is more. Which is one of the things I like about it.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that they've maintained that even with new model releases. The new Cathay stuff is priced the same as stuff that's 20 years old, which kind of brings us on to the next question is, do I have to buy all new miniatures, or can I use older Warhammer Fantasy models? Are like the rules compatible with older models? Is there anything new and you need to be conscious of when that's happening? Which I think is a question a lot of people will ask. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the coolest things about the community, and I think a lot of the content creators, us and others, are part of this, and also the fact that the people who were keeping the game alive when it wasn't in print had to resort to alternative models or used minis, like old Warhammer models or 3D prints, miniatures from other games, and using them. So there's I think a great openness to using whatever model you would like to represent the thing on the tabletop. I think within reason, you want to make sure that it is clear what you're representing on the tabletop. But you can take from all sorts of different sources, the official Games Workshop ones, the Age of Sigmar ones, which would be your premium, more expensive options, but lots of cool Age of Sigmar crossover where models are very valid in Old World, and you can pull from those if you prefer a newer aesthetic than the newer style of Games Workshop design versus a lot of the older models that have been brought out for Old World. Or you can sit in the bushes and watch as like really cool refreshes and updates and new armies are released because they are being sculpted in plastic using those techniques. So it's really cool. And I think that lends to the fact that as long as the footprint is correct, a lot of things are abstracted in the game itself. So as long as the size of the model on its base is correct, you're kind of free to do creatively whatever you want to do with what's on that base. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most awesome things about it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as long as the square bases are the right size, and even if you are someone who wants to change round bases and get the right slaughter trays that those round bases can go in so that the footprint is the same, it kind of gets awkward as models die and, you know, units shrink. Quick tip there is don't be rubbish and let anything die. Then you're in a golden place. You don't have to worry about it. But yeah, like I would agree with you. I don't think also kind of I think we should do due diligence here. When Games Workshop released Warhammer the Old World, lots of old kits were released, much to the joy and also surprise of many people. However, I don't think any of them, I think if we saw like Tomb King skeletons as an example, I think if we were to see Tomb Kings get new models, I don't think we'll see Tomb King skeletons get thrown in the bin and there's never that unit again. I think we just get new models. However, we have just seen with new Marauders that have come out, those new Marauders have gone from a 25 mil base up to a 30 mil base. So they have got a larger base size. So things to be conscious of is older stuff may grow, might go on to larger bases, might get new models. I don't think we're likely to see stuff kind of like get removed from the game, seeing as it's only just been brought out. But I would be wary around metal miniatures and resin stuff and fine cast stuff. I'd just be conscious of that in the future.
Yeah, and also scale matters to you as well. Like the game's clearly moving towards a scale that's closer to the way Age of Sigmar and 40K are made as new models come out. And that can cause a bit of a break in immersion for some. But also, I think, I don't know, it was something that did stress me out before the game came out. But as I added, for example, AOS Blood Knights to my vampire count army, those guys are scaled wildly differently. It didn't bother me, you know, like once they were actually on the table with my existing vampire count zombies from, 100 years ago. So like, I think that just depends. The other great thing about the bases, which I actually kind of prefer having my models on the old Warhammer Fantasy sizes because they almost all were smaller. So like your regular infantry were on 20 millimeter width bases and your large infantry tended to be on 25s. When Old World came out, that moved to regular infantry on 25s and larger infantry on 30s. But you can get basic, because it's rank and flank, you can just get base adapters that make them the correct size in those ranks. And it looks perfectly good. You can hobby up those adapters, and when you have it on the shelf, it takes up less space. So I don't know. I actually don't see that necessarily as a bad thing. I know there's probably people out there who have Marauders right now, and they're like, I just finished all these 25 millimeter bases, but easy enough to go find or make yourself some adapters just to get the sizing right on the table. And honestly, it works super well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Okay, so this is going to be a bit of an odd question, but like, again, for people who are really new, and again, in the comments below, you can leave all of your comments because I'm sure new people will scroll through the comments. So if you've got any thoughts, but like, you want to start playing, this is the first time you watch a video, somehow you're an hour and 12 minutes in. What tools and paint supplies do you think people need? My kind of thing is, if you're building models, I use just clippers. You can just buy hobby clippers from anywhere. And I use, now lots of people use a blunt like hobby knife. I'm old school. I have a Games Workshop mold line remover, which my partner reliably informs me means I'm a child, but that's what I use.
Well, it means you don't cut your fingers much. But yeah, all right.
Ever.
Yes.
And then you need glue, and I use Tamiya thin cement. Plastic cement. That's good call. It's in a little square bottle with a green lid. Perfect for building minis. Those and you need super glue and something called activator. The amount of people in the Warhammer hobby who are incredibly amazed that activator exists. It's where you apply super glue, you apply activator, and it sets immediately. Don't know if you know that exists. Some people
so you don't have to hold it together and risk gluing your fingers. Yes, or some people call it kicker. I think that's a great rundown of getting started. Clippers, You probably want to, go to a hobby shop and get your clippers there. Like some people will obviously start with what they have. They might have something from the workshop or something that they use, but that's a really good tool to invest a few bucks in. And there's lots of different options out there for you to go with. I like with plastic minis that I'm sold on. I have switched to hobby cement. So that's the Tamiya that you described.
Mm-hmm.
The thin can be a little tricky because it is pretty runny. And so if you are starting out, it's a little bit easier to control. I think it's got an orange top. Yeah,
the white top.
Is it an orange top? Either way, the sort of your normal rather than your thin. Like you're just your normal. It's a little easier to control, I think. And one thing though with hobby cement, ventilated room, unless you want to see new colors of the rainbow, because they do have a bit of an intoxicating effect, or can. And super glue, because a lot of the models, especially if you're buying from Games Workshop, we actually are dealing with mini metals occasionally, and resin from what used to be Forge World. So super glue is an important tool. A lot of people just use super glue. One thing that it doesn't do, that the hobby cement does, is hobby cement will actually sort of fuse the plastic. It melts the plastic, so you actually remove a lot of those joining lines when you use hobby cement. That's one of the main upsides to it.
Yeah, the number one hobby supply of all time, though, is one of these. It's a really useful box. It's the A4 size box. I think I maybe own 1,000 of these now. I don't know how many I own, but plenty. But that's a hobby tip from me. And then for painting, like if you got any kind of like beginners tips for painting, jumping into painting.
No word of a lie. Go watch. Go Google the Honest Wargamer Slap Chop, and learn about that style of technique. And because it did change my painting life, and I think a lot of other people, because it allows you to get a really, really good effect with very low skill. So basically, as long as you can hold the brush and you can get it sort of basically, it's more like coloring in line, like coloring. Than it is like having to learn a strict painting technique. It allows you to also see the fruits of your labor a lot faster, which motivates you to do more, which I think is one of the best things about it. And all of the steps involved in that is good. And then because it became a cultural phenomenon in the hobby space, after you watch the original, you can then go see a billion other extrapolations on how to do it in subtly different ways that you don't necessarily need to. My favorite speed paint is Speed Paint 2.0 from the Army Painter. They have really good intro boxes. I don't know if Games Workshop has like a starter set for contrast or not. They don't. Yeah, that's weird. I would say that too if it existed, but it doesn't. So you can't buy that. I would just buy buy your introductory 2.0 set. You're going to have all the colors you need to get started.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it. Quick last question on minis. I forgot to ask this. How do people feel about third-party minis or 3D prints? We covered this basically, but the answer is everyone feels great. Yeah, very open, great. Yeah. That's great.
Outside of an official Games Workshop event, which it takes place, as far as I know, in exactly one place, which is the Warhammer World in Nottingham. And maybe some shops might be a little opposed to 3D printed minis, so you might just check that out. But for the most part, third party, however you can source them. As long as it's representing the rules that it has well, and it's not confusing your opponent, you can really be super creative with how you source and build your armies.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question, which I think people ask is cost and availability. We kind of covered cost. How expensive is it? Start playing Old World really depends on how much you jump in at. But a battalion box is around £100 English. You don't need the books. You'll need hobby supplies, you'll need paint and stuff. So you're probably looking around the £200 mark, maybe £150, £200 is about what I would say is like the lowest entry cost, unless you start doing 3D prints and a bunch of other stuff.
One also awesome way, honestly, if you're more of a, like, most people jump in 2 feet with this, like, because this is something you tend to think about for a long time before you dive into. I don't know a lot of people who've nibbled. But one great way to also get started at a reduced cost is secondhand. And that includes things like paints and hobby supplies. You'll see people moving on to other interests and clearing out what they have. And that's how I got started. Like around 10 years ago was like picking up people sort of liquidating their stuff, and I think that's a really, really great way to do it. Online too, retailers outside of Games Workshop selling Games Workshop stuff tend to do so at least at a 15% discount in North America, sometimes more than that in Europe and the UK. So there are ways to do things a little bit more affordably than just doing it all straight through Games Workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that's everything that I can kind of think through. We are last bit, baby. I didn't cover. I just realized that we are some level through this edition. We don't know how much further the edition is going to be. Like, we don't know if it's going to reset next year. It will not be the same sort of reset that you'll see for 40k and Age of Sigmar. Basically, the stat lines you saw for Old World now are basically stat lines you saw for them 10 years ago. So I wouldn't expect them to have a kind of big overhaul. I don't expect them to anyway.
Well, we don't know. But I would agree that like this game is grounded in very much historically how it's worked for a very long time. And so you can look at something like Horus Heresy, which also has kept, I think they've added perhaps, but like they've not necessarily fully swapped out. Like you'll see, like they've added unit stats, like different stats to units, but they haven't like fully changed how the game works fundamentally. And I would agree with Rob. You're not going to see a massive like fundamentals change with how it works, but they'll maybe shift the nuances around, make some quality of life improvements. What they always do when they release a new edition. I would say though that we're in 2020. This is 2025, but this is for 2026. The closer we get to January of 2026 is when we would be keeping our eyes peeled. Sorry, closer we get to January 2027, which is 3 years from the launch of the original game, is when we start keeping our eyes peeled for that new edition. I would say anytime after January of 2027 would be when I would expect something to appear. When I would start being wondering about, like, do I invest in any of these books? Because sometimes Games Workshop does release a new edition and it's just a continuation and they refresh the books as they go through that thing. Sometimes they do start from scratch. So we won't know until that Rubicon is crossed.
Yeah, but I think just to put some kind of confidence into people watching, I think the chances of a full refresh is in the kind of like 1 to 2% chance, I would argue, versus like more than likely. So I think you can be safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making this video. I wouldn't feel confident in encouraging people to be involved in the hobby at this stage. I'd be like, hold on for a year. Like 40k 11th edition is next summer, so I'd tell everyone to just batten down the hatches, buy nothing, just wait. Okay.
Well, all I'm talking about is like literal rule books. That's literally the only thing I'd be worried about. Your models are going to be safe. Your anything that you actually build and paint is going to still be around. Like I've already said that I think the digital stuff is better anyway. Get the rule books if you think they look cool. That's it. That's the only reason you'd buy a rule book.
And if you have any other further questions, let us know in the comments below. We hope this has been helpful. And for those more experienced people who've tuned in to the whole thing, I want to say a special thanks and thanks to everyone on our Squarebase Patreon. But if you've got any other questions or any other kind of tips that you think we should throw in here, comment section is a place to do it. That's what we're there for.
Yeah, and tips also too for newer hobbyists. Maybe this is something that you jumped into, right? Like that you like this is your first game or first time back to tabletop wargaming in a long time. Pop in the comments. What's your experience? What would you do differently? That kind of stuff, I think, is very, very useful for people reading through the comments. Our comment sections are always filled with really cool insights and people's experiences. So please do share those.
Yeah, it's also good for us to know as well, because even though I went through all these questions earlier, I was like, at the end of the video, I was like, I should have said that we're 2 years into a new edition. Like I should have really contextualized it. So sometimes you just you don't get everything, especially because you're so into it, right? So you're not there. Anyway, hope you've all enjoyed it, Val. It's been really fun.
Yes.
Depends if it's been fun.
No, there's no depending. Squarebase is always fun. That is not it depends.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.